Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode of Everfree Radio, and I'm here today with Full Papers. Why don't you say hi, Full?
Hello, everyone.
And we've got a really, really great guest today. I'm really excited to be able to speak with him. Today, we are speaking with M.A. Larson.
Hi, guys.
You know, for people who don't know, you actually are one of the writers for My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic.
Yes, I am.
So, out of curiosity, why do you go by M.A. Larson and not your name, which is Mitchell Larson?
I was Mitch Larson on everything I worked on up until this. I was at Disney, and most of my credits at that point were boy-oriented, action-oriented. And at the same time I got hired on My Little Pony, I got hired on a Cartoon Network show called Symbionic Titan, which is a very boy-oriented show, a really good show, and it got canceled long before it should have. But I was convinced Symbionic Titan was going to be the thing that got me doing interviews on Skype, and I was super excited for it. And so my agent, when I told him about these two jobs that both happened at the same time, he's like, well, you can't possibly use your real name on My Little Pony. You can't dilute your boy credits. Because, you know, I knew Lauren was phenomenal and Rob was phenomenal, but it's still My Little Pony. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be associated with that. So I agreed with him, and I was like, okay, I'll just use my initials. And so it was to disguise my Symbionic Titan credits is the reason that I'm M.A. Larson. And now I'm fully M.A. Larson. I've changed my IMDb page. I like it a lot better. Never was a giant fan of my name anyways. So who would have thought that My Little Pony would be...
I guess we should ask, what does the A stand for?
Oh, no, I'm not going to tell you that. I get too many tweets asking what it is. That's too fun. I can't give up that.
You know what you could do is you could start just shuffling through adjectives. Awesome, amazing.
Some guy said it was like Harry S. Truman, where the S is just S. I like that. Just A.
I just wanted to start off with an overarching question about how you became involved with writing for the show.
I became involved with writing for the show because I wrote one episode of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends with Lauren, and it went really well, and I would have loved to have worked on that show, but the one I wrote was at the very end of the run. So that ended, and we kind of went our separate ways, and then Lauren got this show, and I came on fairly well about halfway through season one. I think she already had a pretty good rotation of writers, and so I just joined in halfway through.
Well, you started off with actually a pretty fun episode that I know Full was seeing a connection to another series of, but that was the Parasprite episode.
Yes.
And Full, why don't you tell him what you were telling me earlier? What did it remind you of?
Well, I think it reminded everyone of it, but I'm curious to know whether or not, and this makes me sound like such a dork, but I'm curious to know whether or not the Parasprites were modelled consciously or unconsciously after the Tribbles from that very famous classic Trek episode.
Oh my God, you're such a dork.
I know. I get that a lot, believe me.
Well, here's where I lose about half my Twitter followers. I have never seen Star Trek. I've never seen that episode. I've seen the movies, and I love them. But I've never seen the show. Lauren had the idea for that episode, and I still haven't seen it. I've seen quite a few of the Next Generation ones or whatever with Q. But other than that, I have very little familiarity with Star Trek.
I almost wonder why you would see episodes featuring Q. Well,
that was a super fun weekend, by the way. You know, we had the story meetings, and I'd never heard of Q. And then Lauren and Rob were like, you know, you need to watch some Q. I spent the whole weekend watching John Delancey on YouTube. It was, and I got paid. It was great.
I did the same thing at BronyCon earlier this month, but I didn't get paid, so, you know.
Well, getting paid Animation Guild wages is the same thing as not getting paid, so there you go.
Well, you actually are the author of a lot of really popular episodes from Season 1, including Sonic Rainboom, Cutie Mark Chronicles, and I know a lot of people, and I think, Full, you were telling me this too at one point, who think that Sonic Rainboom is their absolute favorite of all time, of all the episodes by all the authors.
Well, it certainly has one of my favourite moments in it, with Rarity's little Icarus moment towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren was very much into including as much references to that kind of thing as possible. So that was her idea, to do sort of an Icarus episode. And a lot of episodes, you know, throughout the series have something like that in them, and they still do. Megan's keeping that going, so...
Well, for, say, the conception of that episode, then, how much of that was Lauren saying, this is what we want the episode to be about, and then you took it and you added the detail, or how much of it was that you, say, came up with the idea independently and then ran it by her? I mean, what was that interaction like?
It is a phenomenal way to run a show, I gotta say. I've worked on like 10 or so shows now, animated shows, and this is by far the best one, and not just because I'm doing an interview for it. It was the same actually on Foster's. They ran the room kind of the same way. Rob was also on that show. Lauren was in the room. But, you get the people together. You've got an approved premise, which is just a paragraph long. And you just go. You just start talking. You spend the whole day in the room with some note cards and brainstorm. So it's Lauren, Rob, and I, and we just kind of find the major act breaks and then fill in everything else after that. And you leave the room that day with 10 to 20 note cards, depending how plot heavy it is. And then, they'll have like hilarious little phrases on them. It's not even complete sentences, but it's like, here's the gist of the scene can be summed up in this phrase or whatever. And then you take that and you write an outline off that and run it past Lauren and Rob. And it's very collaborative. It's very collaborative and very not collaborative, because I don't really interact with the other writers except at the writer summits, which happen at the beginning of every season. Like, for instance, I've only met Charlotte Fulton once. It was the season 2 writer summit. It's the only time I've ever met her. Other than that, every episode you have one all-day meeting, story meeting, and then you are completely on your own, and everything else is email. So, and with Megan, it's a little bit different, because Megan is taking over for Rob and Lauren in a way. So she's obviously one person. So she came up with this idea where she would take 2 episodes and both writers would come in. So, my first story meeting with the Megan regime was me, Megan, and Sydney Morrow. And it works great. That was where we do collaborate more with the writers, the other writers. So there you have it. I mean, I can't possibly say who came up with what when, you know what I mean? It's just like we sit in the room and, hey, what if we try this? No, that doesn't work.
Now, from the beginning of an episode, from the initial idea to the end of the finished script, what is the timeline usually on that?
Well, you got the one-day story meeting, so then you've got probably a week or less to write the outline, which is no big deal. It's like a 5-page, Word document. In that case, you're going from that stack of note cards. So you are filling in some of the details and, actually placing it in the world. This happens here. This happens here. There's a little bit of reading time. Hub is fantastic with note turnarounds. They really get them to you in a timely fashion. And then you have feels like forever to write the script. I think it's like a month, something like that. And second draft is just a day or two. The notes are almost always polished type notes and pretty easy to do. Because that's why I love the way Lauren runs it, because the big structural notes that you get at the very beginning, which is the appropriate time to get them. I've worked on other shows where you get premise level notes after you've written the script, and that's totally bullshit.
Were there any scenes that you were sort of particularly attached to that you wish you could have seen in a final episode, but which kind of got cut somewhere along there?
Wow.
Too broad a question? Too vague?
No, it's a good question. It doesn't really happen much, because by the time you leave the story meeting, you've really got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in the episode. And it's pretty rare that I would add like an entirely new scene and have it taken out. I did see one because I was kind of doing a little bit of research for this. And so I read through some of the earlier drafts of things. And the original draft of, what's it called? Return of Harmony. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
It was called Seeds of Chaos originally, so that's what I keep thinking. But it didn't end with Rainbow Dash. It ended with Pinkie Pie and Discord saying I stole her laughter and she can't laugh anymore. And that was the big problem. It wasn't trying to track down Rainbow Dash. That got changed, obviously, and for the better, because Rainbow Dash, if you track her throughout, she's the one who, says at the beginning, like, I'm not leaving here till this storm is taken care of. She's the one who leaves at the end of the first episode. It should be her who is the last one they have to get. So I like that change. In terms of scenes I would have liked to have seen, I think that there's a scene in Moon Eclipsed with Rarity that I thought was really funny. But I got to tell you this too. The Studio B guys are so good at knowing what to cut out, because that scene, like that episode, I don't know how they fit it into 22 minutes anyways, but that scene, I thought it was pretty funny, but it didn't do anything. It didn't add anything to the story, and they cut it wholesale, which that's the only time I think they've ever done that. But it was a great cut. It really helped the story because that scene just wasn't necessary. But it was funny because it was Rarity giving Luna, a pretty pink princess makeover to try to soften her image, and I thought it was a pretty funny scene. And Rarity is like she's affronted that Luna's not into it.
Well, and that's actually one of the cut scenes that was almost leaked because Hasbro's website for the show had some imagery in there of Luna in that kind of a dress, and so it kind of came out that was a scene that had been cut. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how that will happen. I wanted to go back to when you were talking about your episodes, Return of Harmony, which I think everybody will agree are some of the more epic of the episodes in the series. And I wanted to quick ask you, and this is something I think a lot of people are wondering. There's a scene towards the beginning of the episode where Pinkie Pie is drinking up all of the chocolate milk rain, and everyone out there, I think, made that connection to the internet song by Days on Day or whatever, Chocolate Rain. Right. Was that what you were thinking at the time, or was that somewhere else? Or
no, I had not heard of that until somebody told me, "Isn't that funny? You put that in the episode." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I saw the video, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's really funny." And actually, the Chocolate Rain thing, I'm almost positive was Rob's idea. So, and I don't think he had that in mind either. I just think he thought it was funny. So I do think, I can't swear to it, but I think it was just a complete coincidence that happened, because I had never heard of it. A lot of that kind of thing I'm completely illiterate about.
Sure.
So
people are going to be so disappointed.
They're going to be disappointed.
I can see the comments now.
There's a lot of stuff I'll say that is going to really disappoint people.
You got to take credit for it. When people are giving you credit for that, just take it. Yes, I knew what Chocolate Rain was. I put that in there for a reason.
Yeah, you got to own it. But actually, I think that people, they definitely do read really, really, really into these episodes. For any of them, and look for these.
I love that.
Well, I think it's fun on the one hand, but on the other hand, they then ascribe, their own theories as to why certain things were written or boarded or animated certain ways. And sometimes I think, the explanation is simpler. It just happened to be that way,
Yeah, and I know that's disappointing to some people, but that is really the case. And a lot of times it's just, yeah, that happened. Chocolate Milk Rain kind of coincided with this meme that we didn't really know anything about. Unless Rob did, and maybe he did. I don't know.
Maybe he's not willing to admit that he knew it.
Maybe he's not willing to admit. Although that was his ringtone, so...
Was it really?
No.
Oh.
Well, it's going to be mine now.
So why a labyrinth in that episode? I'm quite curious.
That was Lauren's idea. She wanted to do a mythological backbone for the story, and that was the one she chose, was the labyrinth. And it was a good way to separate all the characters, and that was such a fun story meeting, because the original premise, I just read it again today. It's really short. It's like 5 sentences. And it does mention the labyrinth, but I think we just got much darker with it in the room than I think it was originally going to be. And, I watched some of those scenes now, like the Pinkie Pie scene. I'm like, damn, that's kind of creepy.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why, a lot of people became bronies during the second season, is that you had darker scenes like that. Of course, I've seen a great version of, I think it was in Ponies the Anthology, which is a well-known PMV that fans will know. There's a version of that scene where, they took the audio from Carrie, they're all going to laugh at you, and show all the balloons around her. So
that is fantastic.
And Fluttershy, or I can't say what the fan name for her grayscale self became, but became quite a fan.
Oh no, I told Andrea Lidman this in an interview. I think we can tell Mitch.
You can tell. Well, you can go ahead and tell him. I'm not going to tell him.
All right. Well, whether this remains in the final cut of the interview or not, people have come up with the term "flutter bitch" for her behavior.
Oh, I love that. Now I want to rewrite the script and change it. That's great.
I don't think that they would let you do that, would they?
Yeah, someone might have a problem with that.
there's such good like the because I watched this again recently, and like when she goes and she's going into the library and she stomps on the flowers, the board artist added that, and it's just awesome. It's just so good. It's just like a little middle finger to Twilight, which is exactly what she would be doing. So
Yeah.
I loved her. She was really fun.
Well, and Full was talking a little bit earlier when we were prepping for this interview, and he was saying that he noticed an interesting running theme throughout the episodes that you've written about a certain character. Do you remember this, Full?
I've got to say, I'm quite curious to know who your favorite character to write for is, because my theory, based on some of the scenes we've been given throughout the episodes you've written, is Fluttershy. I mean, you gave us the yay sequence at the beginning of Sonic Rainbow.
No.
Am I right or wrong? Oh, I'm wrong.
You're so far off base. I find her really difficult, actually.
I'm wrong about so many things, so...
Rarity is without question my favorite to write for. I mean, she is so much fun to write for. Fluttershy I find really difficult, actually. It's kind of tricky to make a meek character like that funny. You know, you don't want to get repetitive, and you don't want her to be just sort of like annoyingly, I don't want to say meek again, but meek. So, you know, to have her be actively funny is not particularly easy. But there are times, you know, not to like toot my own horn, but there's a couple of lines I thought were really funny. I watched Super Spidey Cider, whatever, 5000. And there's just a total throwaway line where she says, you know, you're out of cider, and everybody gets all pissed off. You're always out of cider. And she's like, for the record, I don't really mind. And I was like, oh, that's a great line. You know, I wrote it, but it's still really funny. And it's totally Fluttershy. Yeah, I found her difficult, and I'm kind of every time I got a new premise, I was like excited that it wasn't a Fluttershy based episode. Sorry if I'm like stomping on your theory
or on your flower garden or from.
Yeah, exactly. Stomping on your flowers. she's tricky. She's hard.
Well,
because Twilight, you know, Twilight's kind of the straight man, and she's easy to make funny because the straight man. And one of my favorite TV shows ever is Frasier. And it's because you've got this stuffed shirt and you can just make him funny so easily. And Twilight's kind of got that going too. Pinky's naturally funny. You know, they're all kind of, and Rarity is just so much fun to write. But Fluttershy is a more delicate character to make jokes with.
Well, if you model Twilight any bit off of Frasier, does that make Luna Niles?
Luna, huh?
Oh, well, we got to get to her at some point, but yeah. I mean, I was just trying to think. I mean, if you've got, you know, Twilight as the straight man, you know, Niles to me is even stuffier when I watch that show.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, that's an interesting parallel. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, she is more in her own way uptight than Twilight Frasier.
Well, so going back then to the general way that you write episodes. One thing I've noticed when I've interviewed voice actors is that they often say that they try to channel, you know, the character's personality as they're acting the character. Do you try to channel, you know, what your perception of the personality of the characters is when you're writing for the characters? I mean, I imagine you do that to some extent, but when you're, say, sitting down and you have to write for Fluttershy, do you just kind of take a moment and try to put yourself in a Fluttershy sort of mindset, or how do you go about that?
Oh, yeah. It's the hardest thing in animation writing is to write for a show where there's nothing to watch, where the show is so new, there's no episode to look at, there's no voices to listen to, and that was not the case on this show. I came in at episode 10, so there was already, I could listen to the pilot. I think the pilot was the only one I saw, but there were scripts that I could read, and let's say I don't think I ever had a Fluttershy episode, but if I did, I would seek out all the other Fluttershy episodes and just read. The first thing I would do before I wrote the outline and the script is read those Fluttershy episodes so I could get her voice, which is interesting because it comes from multiple writers. But because Lauren and Rob and Megan are good at what they do, she is consistent in how she speaks and thinks and acts. And so, you know, if there's a Fluttershy heavy episode, that's what I'll do is I'll find other Fluttershy episodes, watch them or read them. Preferably watch them so you can hear the voice.
You said that it's easier for you to write for characters after you've seen them and read them and kind of researched the character a bit. That leads then to Luna Eclipsed, where Luna as a character, all we had seen of her before season 2 was about 5 seconds. I think somebody even timed it, 5 seconds of dialogue in the pilot or in the second part of the pilot. So How did you go about characterizing Luna, and what were your influences, and what was the genesis of Luna in season 2 for you?
She changed quite a bit, actually, from the first story meeting to what came out on the air.
Well, so what was your original version or your original vision of Luna's character, and how did that change between when you first wrote it and when it finally broadcasted?
It was another one of these situations where Lauren had an idea for something. She made I'm like hit or miss with references. A lot of really bizarre, obscure references I'll get, and a lot of others I just won't. And she had a reference for a character in Parks and Recreation, which I had never seen. It's the character played by Aubrey Plaza. And she was like, I kind of want her to be like that. And I watched some of those episodes, and that character was hysterical. And it worked beautifully because Luna's whole thing is beneath either that veneer or what she eventually became. She's just kind of like insecure and like, oh my God, I haven't been in polite society in whatever, 5,000 years or whatever it is, 500 years. I don't even know my own show's mythology. Whatever it is. A long
It's
time.
1,000 years. It's 1,000 years.
1,000 years, which is a long time. So she's coming back into this situation. And the beautiful thing about Luna Eclipsed in the beginning was that she's coming into a situation from her own experiences, but ultimately, emotionally, it's kind of the same experience as Twilight. I don't know how to make friends. I don't know how to be around people. It's something I've never really cared about, or in Luna's case, had the opportunity to do. So I loved in that episode the connection between the two of them. And that character, the Parks and Rec character, she was kind of hiding her insecurities beneath, I don't really care. She wasn't like whiny emo girl, because that's just a character that I despise anyways. There's a lot of subtext into it. And then it kind of morphed into, well, wouldn't it be funny if she was awkward in a different way and had all these like ancient Candlelight traditions that nobody's done for 500 years, but she still thinks they're current, like the hoof to the face is like the ancient, not ancient, but traditional Candlelight greeting that nobody does anymore.
And I know people who have changed their keyboards to Caps Luna. I've seen that.
I love what the animators did with the little like white lines coming out of her mouth. It's hilarious. So, but the character's demeanor changed, but where she was coming from was the same all the way through. And her emotional story was the same all the way through. It was just sort of the aggressiveness and the funniness of her altered a little bit along the way.
So maybe she became a little more socially awkward in a different sense, maybe not as standoffish, but just more out of time.
She actually became more princess royalty-ish in the initial versions with that Albert Plaza type character. She was just sort of like, I'm back. You guys are having this night to make fun of me. I don't fit in. And it was good. And I thought it was pretty funny. And it was a good take on her, but then it morphed into, like I said, more of a regal. She gets released from prison, basically, like Cape Fear, and she goes back to the last thing she knew, which is these really arcane royal traditions, which is a great take on the character. So I thought it was a good change, and it was really funny.
I know that Full and I both really appreciated her speaking style, that Shakespearean style of
yes,
older style English. I guess, the scholars would say that it was, that it's modern English technically, but did you maybe read some Shakespeare in advance, or what did you do to write her speaking style to include so many thous and such?
It wasn't anything that good. I don't get paid enough to do that. It was just... No, it was just, giving her the royal we, and in fact, giving her much more than the royal we. She says it just constantly. And then, like some Amish these and thous here and there. And it was more about the attitude. It was more about this, like, removed... It's almost, again, maybe Niles is the way to look at it. It's like if Niles Crane went to a rave, It's that kind of vibe.
This isn't a wine soiree at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And before this interview, I was talking to Full, and we both agreed there were two scenes, even though you said that it was hard to write for Fluttershy, that we really, really liked. Of course, there's the one we were talking about earlier, which was, Fluttershy's yay moment with Rainbow Dash. But then there was that moment in Luna Eclipse, and Full, I know you know what I'm talking about.
Perfect. Lesson over.
I love that line, and she just runs back in and slams the door. That's just brilliant.
Well, that's actually a situation where she's easy to write for because it's inherently scary, and she's so scared anyways. This is just her idea of hell. So yeah, she's just, her whole focus in that scene is how do I get back in that house before I get eaten. So in that case, she was kind of easy to write for.
Well, so maybe the episodes where she really stands out are the ones where she's placed up against, more boisterous or outgoing characters in a sense. I mean, if you look at those two different scenes, the A scene and the, Lesson Over, it's both where she's juxtaposed to Rainbow Dash or Luna, I don't know. Maybe that's just how I see it.
Right. No, that's I'm a massive fan of sitcoms in general. And again, I'm going to go right back to Frasier Crane again, because that's my touchstone. Frasier Crane works so brilliantly because you're taking this stuffy, haughty Brahmin psychiatrist and putting him into a Boston Red Sox bar with Norm and Cliff. That's why he works. And it's the same thing. You put a character somewhere that they shouldn't be, the opposite of what they want, and you're going to get something funny. So hopefully.
Well, they did that in Frasier, the show, as well, with the character of Frasier's dad.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Who's this, kind of blue-collar ex-cop that totally is not the snooty psychologist type.
Yes, absolutely. Everything goes back to Frasier. Everything. Even things that were done before Frasier owe a huge debt to Frasier.
Having not seen Frasier, I'll just be over here.
You, sir, are missing out, my friend.
Yes, now you know where you need to go.
I'm properly ashamed. I'll go and rent it right now.
It is a spectacularly well-written show. Do you ever watch Cheers?
No.
Oh, Lord. Full. There's no hope for him.
I'm terribly ignorant, I know. Shame on me.
Full. What are you doing? You're reading classics and things?
There's no
Stop
hope
studying Latin and watch some Cheers.
Yeah, come on.
When did you first become aware that the show that you were writing for had sort of picked up this very unexpected demographic on the periphery of its intended audience?
I remember this clearly, and I don't really know why, but it was the story meeting for Super Spider Sleazy 6000. And Lauren was like, we started at the meeting, and Lauren's like, have you heard of these bronies? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And she writes down 4chan.org or whatever it is on a piece of paper and slides it to me. And she's like, look at this. So I put it in my bag, and I completely forgot. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. I completely forgot about it. And we had the next story meeting, which was It's About Time. And she actually pulled some of it up. She was like, look at this. Look at what they're doing here. Look what they're doing here. And I was like, what is going on? What is this? And then she would send me things like, I don't know if you guys saw this video of these. There's like a day camp in Russia with all these guys. It was probably like 50, 60, 70 guys, teenage boys in Russia, out in the middle of the Russian, wilderness, doing whatever they can. It's just a handheld camera. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I might have heard of this. I don't know, though.
Oh, it's such a fantastic video. It's really long, but there's one segment where the camera's just kind of going around. Here's these guys doing this, then it goes around, and there's a group of them, probably about 15 to 20 of them with a guitar, and they just start singing Winter Wrap Up with their full Russian accents. All these boys, like teenage, big Russian, badass boys singing Winter Wrap Up. And I was totally charmed. And I'm like, okay, if these are bronies, I love bronies. and then it just kind of, but that's pretty late, because I only wrote, that was the second to last one I wrote in season 2. And because it takes so long for them to be produced, and because I'm never exposed to anything cool unless I interact with other people. It wasn't until that story meeting pretty far into the run that I had even...
Yeah, just to put that into a time frame, can you sort of estimate when?
Well, I can tell you.
Like a month or a year?
I can tell you when I wrote that episode. Because I found that piece of paper that said 4chan on it at the next story meeting. I was like, oh, I forgot about this. You gave me this paper. So she gave that to me. Hold on, I'm just opening this folder. I wrote the outline on mid-November of 2010. That was the first time I heard of 4chan, but I didn't actually go there because I forgot about the paper. And then the next story meeting was mid-December 2010. So that would have been like mid-December 2010 is when I would have first heard about bronies and really understood what that meant. And then it's funny because I would get like the little comments here there. A friend of mine is a high school teacher in Eagan, Minnesota. And he'll text me every now and then, did you write this one? And I'm like, what are you doing watching this? And he's like, I don't, but all these kids who write for the newspaper love the show. And they would ask him to, text me questions and things like that. So it kind of like, it was a huge thing, this massive thing going on that I didn't know anything about until, because I don't know, when do you guys estimate that it all kind of got rolling?
Well, I think,
That's
it was right around then,
time.
actually.
Oh, really?
That's right at the beginning of the fandom.
Oh, okay.
So,
then I was on the cutting edge.
there you go.
I mean, it only started airing in sort of September, and 4chan picked it up pretty quickly. But if you were involved sort of November, December, then yeah, it was,
Well, that makes me feel
that
so
was
much.
long
That
before
was
my
even
time.
before
Anyway.
I thought it was
started,
I thought it was totally uncool and like came in late to the game or whatever, but I was on the cutting edge. Look at that.
You liked it before it was cool.
Oh,
you
God.
were the hipster brony writer.
But isn't that interesting? I mean, I was writing a fairly late episode by the time it got going. I actually thought it was earlier than that. I'm surprised.
So now that you're fully aware of the whole brony phenomenon and, various shady bronies are interviewing you and you're interacting.
Speak for
You are
yourself.
Draft is the shadiest by far.
True, it's true. Now that you're interacting a bit online with the brony demographic, how has that changed, or has it changed your perspective on your career as a show writer? I mean, it seems that your previous shows you worked on, they've been mostly targeted towards a younger demographic. Now you're working on a show that has that, mid-20s male demographic, unintentionally or not. Does that kind of change how you view your career?
I wish. No. If I went to an executive at Nickelodeon, or I'm just using Nickelodeon, any of them, and said, hey, I write for this show and those bronies, they'd be like, so, what's your rate? I don't think it really makes any kind of difference to executives. What they would do is they would look at my samples from Pony and they'd say, oh, I like this or I don't like this, and I would hire them or not hire them based on that. But I'm not sure it makes any kind of difference to career-wise. I mean, it's cool. Like, this whole like interacting with the fandom is completely new to me with Twitter, and I was always like, Joe, God, I hate Twitter, till I really understood what it was. And now it's so much fun. I mean, I really have a good time with all you guys, and especially Mr. Papers, who is my favorite Twitter brony to mess with.
Oh God, thank you very much.
Yeah, I encourage everybody else to do that.
Thanks.
It's at full papers.
Seriously? Oh.
Yes, everyone.
So it's just if you're talking about like writing for an older demographic, unfortunately, this has nothing to do with that. There's a huge big wall between kids animation and primetime animation, and that this wouldn't help at all. Unfortunately, I mean, just from that perspective you're talking about,
Yeah.
it's like I can't go to Fox and say, hey, put me on whatever their show of the day, Seth MacFarlane's show of the day is, because I've got these bronies. They wouldn't care. It's more about your samples, and it's more about your recommendations from people they know.
The check's in the mail for that shout out, by the way. But on the subject of your career, I'm quite curious to know, how did you get your start really in the industry, if we can dial it all the way back to long before ponies?
Sure. I went to college in the University of Miami for filmmaking. I've always been obsessed with films, and I always wanted to be a writer, but I went into screenwriting specifically because I thought it would be an easier way to make a living than writing books or whatever it is. But I have always loved film, and I thought I wanted to be a writer-director. This was, back when Miramax was just like making the best movies in decades. So, and then that all went away, of course. But I went to the University of Miami for that, studied it for a few years, and then moved to New York. I had the option of going either to New York or LA because I knew people both places. And I felt like New York was more my kind of town, so I went there. And I ended up being a bartender at a Cajun restaurant in Queens, which didn't help my career, but was super fun anyways. But from there, I miraculously got a job as an assistant to the director, Mike Nichols, who's just this legendary, one of the greatest directors ever. He did The Graduate and Catch-22 and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Angels in America. He's just legendary, and somehow I got the gig. You know how I got the gig, Draft? You'll love this. His first assistant went to, I'm not going to remember which school, a school in Minneapolis. She was from Milwaukee.
Oh, really?
And so the whole interview was like, oh, did you ever go to this place in Minnesota? What about this place? And it was all about Minneapolis. And I left the interview like, she didn't even ask me anything about film. And then they hired me because we both lived in Minneapolis.
Well, there's a bit of that camaraderie with us Minnesotans, isn't there? I mean,
That's right. That's exactly right.
Especially if you're outside of Minnesota and you run into another Minnesotan, it's like their family.
That's right. I totally agree.
I've told people 1,000 times, I went to college in Virginia, and every time I ran into a Minnesotan, it was just like, wow, you're from Roseville? Oh, that's great. I'm from Wayzata or whatever. And, instantly then the conversation switches to, oh, did you see how bad the weather was? Yeah, And then somebody, is on a snowmobile, and somebody else has a fish house that, a nice house that broke through the ice.
Where was your cabin? Which lake was your cabin
Yeah,
on?
That's right. Well, and then they're like, oh, I don't have a cabin, but I go up to Leech Lake or whatever, or, Mille Lac, and instantly, like, this bonding process. Like, when I found out that you were a Minnesotan as well, I geeked out a little bit. I'm like, oh, all right.
Well, I'm coming to your place for Thanksgiving, so we are.
Are you really? We'll have to meet up for coffee or something.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And the rest of us are just looking on, weeping because we're not Minnesotans.
Except for D. Notive and Fenning, who are Minnesotans, and they're awesome. So, hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, but it's...
We'll live tweet it for you, Paul.
It's true, though. You could go, and if you... In a situation like that, I can totally see them hiring you because you're Minnesotan.
Yeah, that's really why I got the job. Because like I said, I was bartending, and, I'd never assisted anyone before. So it really was... That was the only reason I got the job.
So this is the advice you'd give to people who want to break into the film or TV industry, be from Minnesota?
Lie and say you're from Minnesota, and maybe you'll get lucky. It worked for me.
Well, you have to be able to do the accent just right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got to have your root beer if you're drinking pop. And if you're going to put new shingles on the house, it's on the roof. It's not on the roof.
That's right.
The roof?
The roof, yep.
Get up on the roof there, you see. You got to fix those shingles up on the roof.
Oh, yeah. I went to that Ace Hardware over there on the Frontage Road.
That's great.
I'm not even going to try it.
Yeah, so because I am technically a college dropout, so it wasn't my sparkling credentials or anything like that. It was the fact that I was born in the right place. And it was amazing because when I got the job, he was just starting Angels in America, which was a 6-hour HBO miniseries.
Yeah, I remember that.
Emma Thompson and Patrick Wilson and Al Pacino, and I mean, it was so good. And so I got to see that entire process, which was like watching the filming of a 6-hour movie. And then I was with him for years. I through Closer with Natalie Portman and Clive Owen, and through a couple Broadway plays like Spamalot. I was there for that. And I was doing absolutely awful work, like go buy me this particular brand of toenail clipper. I was doing that kind of work, but I got to watch, the writing of these scripts and the filming of these scripts. And that's when I discovered I have zero interest in directing. I hate being on set. I hate getting up that early. I'm going to focus strictly on writing. I had a writing partner at the time, and we were writing these really dark indie dramas, really violent kind of, what's his name? I can't believe I'm forgetting his name.
Tarantino?
Peckinpah type things. And then we got a job. We actually got a job at Miramax before it went bust with the whole Disney thing, writing an early version of Green Hornet.
Oh, wow.
And that was the only legitimate job I had until I moved to LA. But then the really bizarre thing was I moved to LA in 2005, and it was like starting over completely. There was no momentum at all. And a friend of mine from Minnesota was an animator at Cartoon Network, and he was like, hey, we need a writer on this show. You should, he told me, it was called My Gym Partner's a Monkey on Cartoon Network. And it wasn't on the air yet, but they needed a writer. And he told me, rent all these SpongeBob DVDs, write a couple SpongeBob specs, and we'll see if we can get you on the show. So I spent the whole weekend with like 25 DVDs of SpongeBob, watching them start to finish. Love the show. Such a good show. I got to, there's another admission that's going to lose me 400 to 500 more followers, but I'm not a big animation fan. I've never really watched much animation. This was new to me, SpongeBob. And it was great. I was like, wow, this is really good. So I wrote a couple SpongeBob specs, sent them in, and I got the job. And I didn't realize till quite a bit later that it was pretty unique to get a staff job. There's not a lot of staff jobs in kids animation. It's mostly freelance. So my first job was a staff job, which was phenomenal. I got to go to Cartoon Network every day and write cartoons. So then it became this process of the last 6 months or so of every job, just sheer terror of the season's almost over. What am I going to do next? I didn't know anybody really in the business. It was just horrifying every time a show was about to end. But luckily, I would get one here, I would get one there, and I finally kind of got into this place where I was getting offered things fairly regularly and could go from one job to the next. And that's what I've been doing. In fact, last year, at one point, I was working on 4 shows at once, which I was just like, give me as many as I can, because I know this is feast or famine time, and it's like, I'll take whatever I can get.
I think that's true of everyone in any industry right now.
Yes. Well, the great thing about, again, I'm going to kiss the Hub's ass, but the Hub, man, the Hub was just a saving grace. I was at Disney right before I went to Pony, and the Hub has been my feed bag, ever since. I worked on this. I worked on Chuck and Friends, which was its own thing. I mean, it was a preschool show. And then a new show that's coming up soon called Little's Pet Shop. So the Hub has been, the Hub started with My Little Pony and some of these other shows. So it came about at a great time when the economy was imploding. All of a sudden, there was a whole new network with all these new shows that needed writers. So it was great. It was really great.
Feedback. I see what you did there.
Yeah, I heard that too.
You like that?
When you've written a script, it usually takes, from what I'm hearing, about 1.5 years before the actual episode that script was for actually airs. My question is, do you make a point to watch your episodes when they air, or do you go back and watch them later? And if so, have you found that your vision, as it were, from what you've written is different from what you're seeing on screen?
I don't really watch them live because that's Saturday morning, dude. That's like, I'm asleep. But I got the DVR set to record all of them. And I watch everybody's episodes. It helps a lot if you're going to write a new one to have seen what's come before and to see, oh, they did this in that episode. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
I'll watch all of them. Although I haven't watched them all yet. There's a couple I haven't seen yet that are still on my DVR, which is really sad. And I shouldn't admit to that, but there are a few that I still have to watch.
Do you have a favorite you'll admit to?
Of non-M.A. Larson episodes?
Well, of your own episodes, but of all the episodes as well.
My favorite episode I didn't write is Best Night Ever. I just love it. I think it's so well done, and I love the main 6, and I love the magicalness of the night, and it's just, the song is great. I love that episode. I really enjoy them all, though. I haven't seen one that I haven't really liked. I think it's a great show. I don't say that because I work on it. It really is a great show. I mean, favorite episode I wrote is, I got a soft spot for the Discord episodes just because they were really epic and fun and totally unique. But my favorite is the Super Speedy Cider Sweetie 6000.
Is that because you get to have the little Music Man nod in there?
Yeah.
There is that, and I'm really not a musical fan, and I hadn't seen the Music Man until we had the meeting, and I watched the Music Man, and I was like, whoa, this is unbelievable. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Robert Preston is like my god now. Like a lot of people, my touchstone for that was that Simpsons parody they did with the monorail.
Yeah,
that was the sum total of my knowledge of the Music Man, because I didn't really watch musicals. But Rob and Lauren were like, you got to watch this one. It's great. And I did, and I was blown away. And it really energized, I think, the writing of that script, because I loved that character. And the Flim Flam brothers they're so much fun. There's so much energy with them. And I watched that episode, and I feel like that episode has a lot of energy in it.
Well, a town with money is like a mule with a spinning wheel. Damned if he knows how he got it, damned if he knows how to use it. I love that episode of The Simpsons, too. And I think everyone I know who watched that episode, they all immediately made that connection. I mean, it's just so obvious. It's just great.
Yeah, how could you not? Well, that was the thing, is I didn't want to parody a parody. I don't want to parody Monorail. So I watched The Music Man, and I was like, if I'm going to parody something, I'm going all the way back to the beginning. And I watched the Monorail one again recently, just the song, and I was shocked by how short it was.
Yeah, it's only about like 10, 15 seconds or so, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remembered it being a lot more, it was hugely impactful, but I guess because I remember it so well, I guess I thought it was longer. So I was surprised, actually, when I saw that, and then I saw this episode and how long the song was, and I think in a good way. I really love that song. Could have been the whole first act, and I would have been happy. Because you're telling a story, and you're telling it in such a fun way, and that guy can write some music, that Ingram.
Yeah.
That dude is awesome.
He's incredibly talented. I did want to ask you, though, you wrote the lyrics for that song, didn't you?
Yes.
Well, I've got another question for you that will settle a dispute that's in the fandom right now. Hopefully, you know the answer to this, and maybe this is kind of a question that I'll have to ask the storyboard artists or something. But you wrote the episode "It's About Time," and in that episode, we have all sorts of fun time travel, but we also have what the fans have been calling Future Twilight. And Future Twilight's design or look in the show is this kind of like leather jumpsuit with an eye patch, and I wanted to know if you had any hand in the creation of that vision of the character, and if so, was that Solid Snake or was that Snake Plissken?
Yes and no, and again, here goes another 150 followers if I have any left. I have never heard of Solid Snake. I don't know what that is. I don't really know video games really at all since Mario Kart and GoldenEye. That was the end of my video gaming. They got too many buttons. I can't handle all those buttons. I basically, in the story meeting, obviously we had to have all these specific things like the scar and the cut and the outfit and, all these specific looks had to happen because they became things that happened to her along the way. So she was described as pretty much how you see her. I would not be at all surprised if, and I don't know, but if the design team and the Studio B people had Solid Snake in mind, or Snake Plissken or whatever it is, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Solid Snake is a video game character. Snake Plissken is...
Him I know.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have him in mind. Maybe the designers did, but the way she was described was strictly for the plot. It was just, she's going to get hit in the face with a scroll, so she needs a cut on her cheek. It was that. It wasn't like, hey, let's make her look like this. The design team may have had that in mind. I don't know. But yeah, again, I don't know anything about video games, so no.
Well, and I got one last question for a specific episode, which is Ponyville Confidential, another one that you've written. In that episode, you had... Well, actually, it kind of ties in a sense to, the Cutie Mark Chronicles. Do you find writing for the Cutie Mark Crusaders to be a different kind of experience, given you've got these three, kids, effectively, that have to each have their own characterizations? Or is that easier for you to do, given that it's a kid show?
Or to phrase that a different way, do you dislike them as much as some fans do?
Wait a second.
You dirty bastards.
I like them. I'm just saying some people don't.
Let's put it this way. If I had a choice, I probably wouldn't choose to write a Cutie Mark Crusader episode. It's just, you get the premise that you get. And Ponyville Confidential was actually my premise. That was that was late in the season, and Rob and Lauren had sent out a call for more premises, and that was one of the ones I sent in. And then it got approved, and I was like, "Oh no, now I have to write this." So I did it to myself. But I don't dislike them, and I really like in that episode Sweetie Belle and Rarity. Their relationship, I think, is really fun and very relatable with the snooping and all that. Plus, Sweetie Belle was my vehicle to get to write more Rarity lines, so I was happy with that.
The gilded pages of your betrayal.
I love writing her when she gets into that mode.
Well, and et tu, Gabby Gums. I mean, thank you for that.
No, I mean, it's like if I get assigned a Crusaders episode, even if it's mine, it's like, okay, what do we do now? You just make it as good as you can, and they're tricky because they do sort of blend together, and I do think we try to get away from the constant pursuit of the cutie mark. Maybe not in season 2, but I said too much. With this show, its target audience is little girls, so with a thing like Ponyville Confidential, that's not going to be like a totally original idea. It's just how do our characters operate in a very familiar sitcom style plot. And a lot of the episodes are like that. It's a very familiar plot, and it's not designed to be, The Wire. So what would I choose? I don't really know. I mean, whatever. I don't really care. What I like doing is trying to find a way to take whatever the storyline is and just seeing what these particular characters would do. And probably, it would be Rarity, just because she's so fun. But it's moments like It's About Time, where at the beginning, Twilight's kind of freaking out. I got to remove this. I got to reschedule that. And she just says this offhand line, I'd have to reschedule lunch with Pinky, and you know what a nightmare she is. And I love this idea that outside of the context of the show, like Twilight and Pinky have scheduled a lunch together. There's like life happening between the episodes. And I would just like to get as much of that in as possible. Just feels like a 3-dimensional world, And then we come in for this big dramatic moment, whatever the episode is, and then we go away and life is still going on.
So you look at it in a sense like a sitcom.
Totally, 100%. Yeah. It's very, if you look through the episodes, there's a lot of, and in fact, I think a lot of the writers would agree that we're all big sitcom fans. And, I know that a lot of them love Brady Bunch as much as I do. I'm a huge Saved by the Bell fan, which I'm not ashamed to admit. I grew up, I didn't really grow up on a lot of cartoons. I grew up watching whatever my dad wanted, which was Crime Story and Cheers and The Jeffersons and Three's Company and LA Law. I watched a lot of adult shows, but that sitcom format is very much ingrained in how I write. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a plot line everybody's seen a million times before and then saying, what do my characters do when you put them in this very familiar situation? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
you're writing for 7-year-old girls. Why do you want to reinvent the wheel? Just give them something familiar and then just say, what is Rarity going to do? Because she's going to do it totally different from how Louise Jefferson would do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, I heard somebody once say that good writing is when you don't have to explain the emotions of the characters to your audience. You let the audience fill that in a sense. And I think it almost applies too to what you were just referencing, where you have that three-dimensionality of an episode where, the audience can kind of fill in like the gaps between the episodes in a sense. You give them those hints, but it gets them thinking about it and it puts those characters in a larger context. I think that kind of holds true.
There was another one I noticed today that I totally forgotten about, but from Cutie Mark Chronicles at the very beginning, the ziplining thing, one of them says, "Are you sure we're doing this right?" Spike said it's so much fun. And then you instantly, it's a total throwaway line. Maybe you don't even think about it, but if you do think about it, you get visions of Spike out having a great time ziplining. And to me, that's really funny, like it's the three-dimensionality. It's a tiny little throwaway line, but it conjures up things that are happening between episodes. And I do think that's part of the appeal for Bronies is there's a linear world happening in this show.
And if there isn't art of that, there's going to be art of that within the next 24 hours. Spike ziplining.
Yeah, that was actually something I was going to say too, is that, the Bronies out there are a very creative bunch. There are a lot of fanfic writers, and I know that the show writers don't read fanfics because they don't want it to influence, but, there are a lot of artists and a lot of musicians and whatnot. And I always ask this evil question. I think Full knows what I'm about to ask. If you could have something from the fandom produced art-wise, even writing-wise or music-wise, what would it be? Because it will probably get done within hours of this being released.
Oh my God.
I told you it's an evil question.
You're being handed so much power right now.
Indeed.
Now abuse it.
This probably already exists, actually. But maybe that Hydra, I don't remember what episode that was. Maybe a main 6 version of that. I would love to see what all 6 of if you take all 6 of the main ponies and you just like scrunch them together like silly putty. What does that creature look like?
You know what? I have been in this fandom now for almost a year, and in my position with Ever Free Radio, I have seen tons and tons of art, lots of different creative things by different fans. I have never seen that. I think somebody should do it.
I have never seen that. I never wish to see that.
Here's another way to put it, though. You got Discord, and he's got the giant tooth and the talon and all that. So if you take the main 6 ponies and you put them into a Discord situation, one beast that is made up of those 6. Give me that.
Now, I have seen that. I've seen that.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, well, it was a pony with different characteristics of the different ones. And I've seen a Pinkie Pie Discord thing as well, but I've never seen a Hydra one.
Okay, forget that. Give me the Hydra.
You've heard it, artists. M.A. Larson demands a Hydra.
Give me the Hydra.
Well, before we wrap this up, the last question I have for you, beyond everything else that you've been doing with Pony, is do you have any upcoming projects or anything that you would like the fans to know about?
I do. I have well, here's the thing is...
Maybe you're talking about the novel you're writing, the one that...
Yes.
I was going to say, too, and I was going to mention this after the recording, we're more than happy to record another interview closer to when that comes out that focuses 90% on that. That's not a problem at all.
Don't worry about that. I'm trying to, because I know there's a lot of Bronies who are writers, so you get tweets from them. And I'm trying to not stomp on their flowers, but I want to be realistic. I want to be realistic about how it goes. It's like, if I was like, hey, I'm going to make a living writing for My Little Pony, That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It just doesn't pay that well. You have to be working on multiple things. And this is where I was going is in the meantime, while I was working on Pony and several other shows, I wrote a book. And I actually think bronies will love it. It's got a lot in common with Pony. It's about girls, first of all, and like a core group of girls. And it's got a lot of one of the things that really attracted me to My Little Pony before I even knew about the bronies. And one of the reasons I love writing for it is because I've seen so much animation for kids that's so snarky and clever and postmodern and, just nonsense that I can't stand. It really makes me crazy. And Pony from the beginning was so just purely just joyous. It's just a happy show. It's good. They love each other. It's not, it's not overly clever for the sake of being overly clever. And that really attracted me to the show. And that's kind of what is in my book too. It takes place in Grimm's fairy tale world. And it's about these girls who go to this boot camp to learn how to become princesses. And the wider problem is that a princess is the last line of defense against witches. So it's not just a girl sitting in a tower brushing her hair. When's my prince going to come? It's like, I'm going to go to this place, learn all of these Grimm's fairy tale princess tropes. But in the process, if I don't do well, witches are going to take over the world. So it's got a real kind of dark epicness to it. And Grimm's fairy tales, if you read the actual ones and not the Disney ones, are really dark.
Yes, they are.
So it's got a lot of that. It's kind of scary in places, and the witches are a real threat. And it's a world where, like I was saying earlier about how Pony has this three-dimensionality, it's similar to that. This is a world where Cinderella actually lived. She went to this camp years ago. So, what I was telling to the producers, because I sold it as a movie, what I was saying to the producers when I went to the school at the University of Miami, there was a place on campus called The Pit, which was just this little ravine with some palm trees and a picnic table. There was nothing. But everybody wanted to go down there and like drink beer and smoke pot or whatever, because that's where Jim Morrison used to hang out when he went to UM. So it's that kind of vibe at this camp. The girls are walking around, not Cinderella smoked pot over there, but, Cinderella used to sleep in that bunk. You know what I mean? She lives there. She lives in this world. Like, all the Grimm's characters actually live in this world. And so it's what happens if you expand the Grimm's world out to contain all these characters, and there's just this big epic war going on between princesses and witches. So it's got the same sort of female empowerment kind of thing as Pony. I'm a huge hater of the whole phrase girl power, and I think it's so trite. That I like the real girl power, and I think that's what it is, hopefully. So basically, the short version is I wrote the book. I finished it about a week and a half before my daughter was born, because I knew if I didn't, I was never going to do it. And I sold it to Penguin. It's supposed to come out. The first one's supposed to come out next summer, and it's hopefully going to be a 3-book series. And then I got Reese Witherspoon on board to produce it, and she's going to be in it.
Oh, wow.
And we sold it to Lionsgate Summit, who made Hunger Games and Twilight. So they know about adapting book series. So I was really excited about that. That just happened, a month or so ago.
Congratulations.
So
yeah, congrats.
Thanks.
I look forward to seeing it.
I hope it comes out.
reading it, and seeing the film. You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Right. I do. So yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot that I got from Pony that I took to that book. There's no question about it. I love the joyousness of Pony, and I try to get that into the book too, without all the pop. There's a lot of pop culture references in My Little Pony, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying the overly postmodernist kind of nonsense that kids just don't need to be involved with, Well, I would love to ask you guys a question.
Oh, by all means.
Because you, Mr. Draft, have created this like brony media empire.
A little bit.
And
he is kind of Rupert Murdoch.
He's the Rupert Murdoch of Bronyville. And Papers is like, Full Papers is like the Truman Capote of Ponyville.
That's way too high flattery, mate.
How did you guys end up in these positions?
In my case, we started off as just a simple podcast. Everfree Radio was we would combine interviews, episodes.
Wait, go back earlier. How did you get into this show at all?
Well, actually, going all the way back, I'm actually by trade a high school speech and debate coach. And I had a student speech team on memes. he introduced me through his speech to Meme Base, which is a website that compiles memes and whatnot. And I started seeing a lot of Brony related memes appearing on that site. And so there were a few months there where I knew of the Brony phenomenon, but I never got into it because I thought, okay, well, this is just some weird internet thing. I probably won't get it. It's out of 4chan or something. And I finally, in August of last year, forced myself to sit down and watch the pilot. So I watched the pilot of the series, and it's a 2-parter. And so I got through the first half, and I thought, okay, that wasn't so bad, but it's a cliffhanger, so of course I have to see the second half.
Of course.
And so I watched the second half, and I thought, you know what, that actually was fairly decent. I like the animation style, the writing's been good, I like the voice acting, whatever. Let's see if it holds. So then I watched the 3rd episode, and then the 4th, and then the 17th, and I think... Yeah, and it was somewhere around the line, and I'm trying to remember which episode this was in, but it was somewhere around the point where Pinkie Pie is, saying, "Oh, Rarity's gonna become a crazy cat lady," and Twilight, I think, says, "No, she's not," and Pinkie says, "Give her time," and I just kind of paused the episode, and I hung my head in resignation. And
That's suited for success.
I am Brony.
Yeah, I am Brony, and so after that point, I I started frequenting certain Brony websites and ended up talking to other Bronies online and decided that we should slap together a podcast. And we started in I think our first episode was released in October of last year, and we combined interviews with episode reviews. I've actually reviewed several of your episodes as a part of that, and then from there, we just kind of kept expanding. So yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That's awesome. And now you've got my phone tapped.
You know what, though? That's for your own safety and for ours as well. That's just...
It's all right. He's got mine tapped as well. It's just the thing he does. It's how he shows affection, really.
It shows that I care. That's terrible. Oh, anyway. Paul, why don't you give him your story?
I had a friend who watched it and sang its praises and IM'd me one day saying, Will, you've got to watch this show, you'll love it. And I'm like, well, My Little Pony. I've got 3 older sisters, and they had My Little Pony back in like the 80s or whatever. So I was naturally sort of not predisposed to watching a show called My Little Pony, but a friend of mine was insistent that I would like it. And eventually I just said to her, look, I'm in the middle of finals. I'm finishing up my degree right now. I'm in criticism mode. If I watch this, I'm going to take it to pieces and I'm going to explain to you all the things that are wrong with it, and you're going to hate me for it because you really like this show. And they're like, no, this show has actual depth. It's sophisticated. You'll like it. And I'm like, all right, fine. For you, dear, I will watch it. So I sat down and watched the pilot. And this was leading into finals week, I think. So, of course, I had nothing more important to do, like, study for finals. So I watched the pilot, and then, much like Draft, I watched the 3rd episode, and then the 7th episode, and then the 15th episode, and I was pretty much screwed at that point. It was all downhill from there.
I love it. That's really fun to hear.
Well, my favorite part of the whole thing, too, is that you find out people later on are bronies that you wouldn't expect. Like, that student that I was telling you about later on I found out that he was a brony, and he kind of surreptitiously found out that I was Final Draft from Everfree Radio. And he kind of came up to me one time at one of my practices with him, and he said, "So, Mr. B, Final Draft, I should say." And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Deny everything.
And he goes, "Are you a brony?" And I looked at him and I said, "Would it make me 20% cooler if I said yes?"
Nice.
And he goes,
Well
"I
done.
knew it." And then, of course, my favorite moment was after I had just finished interviewing Ashley Ball, voice of Rainbow Dash and Applejack, and his favorite character of all time is Rainbow Dash, and he came up to me and he goes, "Mr. B, I hate you." I said, "Why?" "I heard the interview." I'm like, "Don't you have homework to get back to or something?" I just like him. I like him a little bit, but
That is excellent. That is
cold, man.
actually, do you ever get people coming up to you, or do you see bronies out in public now? Do you?
No, man, and I've been looking. Every time I go to the airport, I'm like, I'm gonna see a shirt or something somewhere, but I've never seen one. Maybe because I'm in LA where everybody's just too cool, but
Well,
I've never seen one.
Come to Everfree Northwest and you'll see many of them.
I wish I could.
Yeah, I can tell you, by the way, just because this is now my life, apparently, that I'm the senior PR consultant for Equestria LA, which is going to be a convention in Los Angeles in November. And I'll bet you, I know
we are in talks for that one. I guess I can't remember her name,
Karen,
but whoever it is was
Karen.
She was clearing everything with
Karen Padilla. Yep, I'm working with her.
But I am going to me and AKR are going to Midwestria.
Oh, you are going to be there. Yep. I might be there myself. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's driving distance from Minneapolis, so.
Oh, definitely.
Plus it's Chicago.
Come on, Fool. Get in there.
Come on, Fool.
Chicago, baby.
What, Midwestria?
Yes.
He just got back from Ohio.
I just got back, exactly. 10-hour drive today.
This is a little bit past Ohio. It's right there. Chicago.
I'll see if I can get the air miles together.
Oh, that'd be great.
That's 2 days before I need to fly to the UK to do my masters, so that's not really going to work.
Direct flights from Chicago to the UK.
There you go.
Oh, Lord. Well, I haven't booked them yet, so that's actually a possibility. I could spend 2 days in Illinois and then fly to...
Don't do it for you. Don't do it for me. Do it for Mitchell Awesome Larson.
Do it, man.
Come on.
Oh,
You'll love
Chicago. You can't put me in this position because you know what I'll choose.
I can't believe I've done this.
I can't believe you've done this.
I'm going to link him that video. I think that he'd appreciate that.
Oh, God.
This is a video we've been referencing all the way through here. It's this guy, he's on camera, he just gets decked for no reason. And he says in like the most perfectly British way, I can't believe you've done this. And it's just addicting to watch. But anyway, all right, well then well, so looking at your general experience working with My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, how has the experience working with that entire creative team been? I know that Lauren approaches it from a really organic standpoint. I mean, really, that must be a positive work environment for you.
There's no question about it. It's the best show I've ever worked on. Lauren and Rob are spectacular. They ran it in such a good way. They set such a nice method of working, and Megan has totally picked that up. And Megan is spectacular, and she totally gets it and knows why the show works. And it's great. I mean, season 3 is going to be fantastic with a few misses along the way. That was a joke, by the way. The board artists and the character designers and the voice talent, I've never met any of them, but they're all fantastic. And I turn on an episode and I watch it. I'm like, oh my God, this is better than what I wrote. This is really great. They do such a nice job of putting the whole thing together. And there's little touches they throw in. There's jokes. There's emotional beats they throw in. The character designs are great. The music is out of control. It's just it's been such a dream job, and it's bizarre because like I said, I only met Charlotte once. I've never met any of the artists. So in a way, like I don't know any of these people, but they're phenomenal. So yeah, everybody has been absolutely great.
Well, I think overall, I mean, really that energy kind of comes through in the final product. I mean, everyone I've ever talked to that's been involved in the production of the show has said similar things, just that positivity kind of, well, in a sense, shines through. So I'm glad to hear that it's the same case for you and the other writers that I've spoken to as well. And let me just say on my part, and I'm pretty sure that Full will agree with me on this, is that the writing on the show has just been phenomenal. So keep up the great work, really.
No, the writing's terrible. I disagree completely. It's my least favorite part of the show. Just awful.
That's it, Full. You're out of the fandom. That's it.
Kidding.
Card
for the record,
revoked.
For the love of all that is holy, I'm joking.
The writing is kind of shit, actually. Except for Best Night Ever.
Well, I know some storyboarders who wish they could have a word with a couple of the authors, but yeah, we don't worry about such things.
Well, actually, sorry, I'm totally going to ramble on, but I got held to a strict 30-page limit after I think it was Luna Eclipsed. I came in for the story meeting on, I guess, Secret of My Excess, and Lauren's like, Jason Thiessen has requested that your scripts are only, for whatever reason, my scripts would go longer than their page count. Like a 34, 33 page script for me was much longer than the same page count for, whoever else. I don't really know why, but they put me on a strict 30-page limit, which was great. It's so nice when you're a writer to have fences. it's hard. It's hard to, sometimes the pacing suffers, but yeah. I don't know where I was going.
You know what? Actually, if we're going to talk about Secret of My Excess, I'm going to ask it full. I'm going to ask it.
Don't ask it because it's like asking the end of the film with Bill Murray in Japan. You can't do that.
I'm sorry, that just doesn't.
Lost in translation.
You can't ask the Lost in Translation Secret of My Excess question. You just can't.
I'm asking it. I don't.
All right.
Damn the results. Damn the torpedoes. Full speed.
I already know. You don't even have to ask it. I got a bunch of tweets about that, and I direct messaged the asker because I think, like, from what I've seen and like tweets that I've gotten and things like that, there's just interpretations, and I don't want to like stomp on people's roses. So I direct messaged the guy and I said, do me a favor. If you can kind of don't just like spread this out. Like if somebody wants to know, then they can know. But like for people who don't want to know, I don't want them to like have this thrust into their faces. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to answer your question.
Oh. What if I said...
But it's out there. It is out there.
What if I said that the recording was off? And what if I said there were $10,000 under your front step? No, I don't.
Well, I can tell because I can see a little recording machine next to your name. So
yeah. No, what was it? I can understand that. I think we all can,
That struck me as one of these things because I got some opinions that were really very serious, and I was like, this is one of those things that's not like some frivolous little thing. People really care about this, and I don't want to come out and say it's this way, damn it, and everybody who thinks otherwise is wrong. So I was like, whatever, I'll tell this guy privately, and then I think he did put it out, but spoilered it or something like that, which is great. He did what I requested, so cheers, brother.
Yeah, and I don't think I even ever saw that, so I mean, he did a good job.
I didn't see it, and I don't want to see it.
I do want to see it.
I'm happier not knowing.
Two guys right here on the recording, one wants to know, one doesn't, so I don't want to be the guy who's like, hey, Full, here it is.
You know what Full needs to do? He needs to do what he always does. Puts his hands over his ears and just go, nah.
Dude, get those spy cameras out of my flat.
What can I say? Okay, it's for your own safety.
You need to stop taking photos of me. It's weird at this point.
This draft guy is so shady.
Oh my god.
He really is. Here's the
Oh my god.
Now I can't remember the name of the character.
Honestly, I'm too technologically inept to even attempt something like that. If I ever actually set up a secret camera, it would just be this gigantic like JVC VCR thing that would be blatantly obvious. No. Anyway, no. Okay. Well, I think that addresses it. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, are we good to wrap this up? Anything else we should cover?
I don't think so.
All right.
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, I'll quick wrap it up. Well, M.A. Larson is one of the writers of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. His show credits include The Secret of My Excess, Luna Eclipse, a personal favorite of mine, Return of Harmony, Ponyville Confidential, It's About Time. M.A. Larson, thank you so much for joining me in Full Papers today.
Yeah, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you, guys. It's great to meet you guys.
This has been Final Draft and Full Papers with Everfree Radio. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode of Everfree Radio, and I'm here today with Full Papers. Why don't you say hi, Full?
Hello, everyone.
And we've got a really, really great guest today. I'm really excited to be able to speak with him. Today, we are speaking with M.A. Larson.
Hi, guys.
You know, for people who don't know, you actually are one of the writers for My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic.
Yes, I am.
So, out of curiosity, why do you go by M.A. Larson and not your name, which is Mitchell Larson?
I was Mitch Larson on everything I worked on up until this. I was at Disney, and most of my credits at that point were boy-oriented, action-oriented. And at the same time I got hired on My Little Pony, I got hired on a Cartoon Network show called Symbionic Titan, which is a very boy-oriented show, a really good show, and it got canceled long before it should have. But I was convinced Symbionic Titan was going to be the thing that got me doing interviews on Skype, and I was super excited for it. And so my agent, when I told him about these two jobs that both happened at the same time, he's like, well, you can't possibly use your real name on My Little Pony. You can't dilute your boy credits. Because, you know, I knew Lauren was phenomenal and Rob was phenomenal, but it's still My Little Pony. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be associated with that. So I agreed with him, and I was like, okay, I'll just use my initials. And so it was to disguise my Symbionic Titan credits is the reason that I'm M.A. Larson. And now I'm fully M.A. Larson. I've changed my IMDb page. I like it a lot better. Never was a giant fan of my name anyways. So who would have thought that My Little Pony would be...
I guess we should ask, what does the A stand for?
Oh, no, I'm not going to tell you that. I get too many tweets asking what it is. That's too fun. I can't give up that.
You know what you could do is you could start just shuffling through adjectives. Awesome, amazing.
Some guy said it was like Harry S. Truman, where the S is just S. I like that. Stay.
I just wanted to start off with an overarching question about how you became involved with writing for the show.
I became involved with writing for the show because I wrote one episode of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends with Lauren, and it went really well, and I would have loved to have worked on that show, but the one I wrote was at the very end of the run. So, you know, actually placing it in the world. This happens here, this happens here. There's a little bit of reading time. Hub is fantastic with note turnarounds. They really get them to you in a timely fashion. And then you have, like, it feels like forever to write the script. I think it's like a month, something like that. And second draft is just a day or two. You know, the notes are almost always polished type notes and pretty easy to do. Because that's why I love the way Lauren runs it, because the big structural notes that you get at the very beginning, which is the appropriate time to get them. I've worked on other shows where you get premise level notes after you've written the script, and that's totally bullshit.
Were there any scenes that you were sort of particularly attached to that you wish you could have seen in a final episode, but which kind of got cut somewhere along there?
Wow.
Too broad a question? Too vague?
No, it's a good question. It's, you know, it doesn't really happen much, because by the time you leave the story meeting, you've really got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in the episode, and it's pretty rare that I would add like an entirely new scene and have it taken out. I did see one because I was kind of doing a little bit of research for this, and so I read through some of the earlier drafts of things. And the original draft of what's it called? Return of Harmony. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
It was called Seeds of Chaos originally, so that's what I keep thinking. But it didn't end with Rainbow Dash. It ended with Pinkie Pie and Discord saying I stole her laughter and she can't laugh anymore. And that was the big problem. It wasn't trying to track down Rainbow Dash. That got changed, obviously, and for the better, because Rainbow Dash, if you track her throughout, she's the one who, you know, says at the beginning, like, I'm not leaving here till this storm is taken care of. She's the one who leaves at the end of the first episode. It should be her who is the last one they have to get. So I like that change. In terms of scenes I would have liked to have seen, I think that there was a scene in Moon Eclipsed with Rarity that I thought was really funny. But I got to tell you this too: the Studio B guys are so good at knowing what to cut out, because that scene, like that episode, I don't know how they fit it in the 22 minutes, anyways. But that scene, I thought it was pretty funny, but it didn't do anything. It didn't add anything to the story, and they cut it wholesale. Which that's the only time I think they've ever done that. But it was a great cut. it really helped the story because that scene just wasn't necessary. But it was funny because that ended and we kind of went our separate ways. And then Lauren got this show, and I came on fairly well about halfway through season 1. I think she already had a pretty good rotation of writers, and so I just joined in halfway through.
Well, you started off with actually a pretty fun episode that I know Full was seeing a connection to another series of, but that was the Parasprite episode.
Yes.
And Full, why don't you tell him what you were telling me earlier? What did it remind you of?
Well, I think it reminded everyone of it, but I'm curious to know whether or not, and this makes me sound like such a dork, but I'm curious to know whether or not the Parasprites were modelled consciously or unconsciously after the Tribbles from that very famous classic Trek episode.
Oh my God, you're such a dork.
I know. I get that a lot, believe me.
Well, here's where I lose about half my Twitter followers. I have never seen Star Trek. I've never seen that episode. I've seen the movies, and I love them. But I've never seen the show. Lauren had the idea for that episode, and I still haven't seen it. I've seen quite a few of the Next Generation ones or whatever with Q. But other than that, I have very little familiarity with Star Trek.
I almost wonder why you would see episodes featuring Q. Well,
that was a super fun weekend, by the way. You know, we had the story meetings, and I'd never heard of Q. And then Lauren and Rob were like, you know, you need to watch some Q. I spent the whole weekend watching John Delancey on YouTube. It was, and I got paid. It was great.
I did the same thing at BronyCon earlier this month, but I didn't get paid, so, you know.
Well, getting paid Animation Guild wages is the same thing as not getting paid, so.
Well, you actually are the author of a lot of really popular episodes from season 1, including Sonic Rainboom, Cutie Mark Chronicles, and I know a lot of people, and I think Full, you were telling me this too at one point, who think that Sonic Rainboom is their absolute favorite of all time, of all the episodes by all the authors.
Well, it certainly has one of my favorite moments in it, with Rarity's little Icarus moment towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren was very much into including as much references to that kind of thing as possible. So that was her idea to do sort of an Icarus episode, and a lot of episodes, you know, throughout the series have something like that in them, and they still do. Megan's keeping that going. So.
Well, for, say, the conception of that episode, then, how much of that was Lauren saying, you know, this is what we want the episode to be about, and then you took it and you added the detail, or how much of it was that you, say, came up with the idea independently and then ran it by her? I mean, what was that interaction like? It
is a phenomenal way to run a show, I gotta say. You know, I've worked on like 10 or so shows now, animated shows, and this is by far the best one, and not just because I'm doing an interview for it. It was the same actually on Foster's. They ran the room kind of the same way. Rob was also on that show. Lauren was in the room. But, you know, you get the people together. You've got an approved premise, which is just a paragraph long. And you just go. You just start talking. You spend the whole day in the room with some note cards and brainstorm. So it's, you know, it's Lauren, Rob, and I, and we just kind of find the major act breaks and then fill in everything else after that. And you leave the room that day with 10 to 20 note cards, depending how plot heavy it is. And then, you know, they'll have like hilarious little phrases on them. It's not even complete sentences, but it's like, here's the gist of the scene can be summed up in this phrase or whatever. And then you take that and you write an outline off that and run it past Lauren and Rob. And it's very collaborative. It's very collaborative and very not collaborative, because I don't really interact with the other writers except at the writer summits, which happen at the beginning of every season. Like, for instance, I've only met Charlotte Fulton once. It was the season 2 writer summit, the only time I've ever met her. Other than that, you know, every episode you have one all-day meeting, story meeting, and then you are completely on your own, and everything else is email. So, and with Megan, it's a little bit different, because Megan is taking over for Rob and Lauren in a way. So she's obviously one person. So she came up with this idea where she would take 2 episodes and both writers would come in. So, you know, my first story meeting with the Megan regime was me, Megan, and Sydney Morrow. And it works great. That was where we do collaborate more with the writers, the other writers. So there you have it. I mean, I can't possibly say who came up with what when, you know what I mean? It's just like we sit in the room and, hey, what if we try this? No, that doesn't work.
Now, from the beginning of an episode, from the initial idea to the end of the finished script, what is the timeline usually on that?
Well, you got the one-day story meeting, so then you've got probably a week or less to write the outline, which is no big deal. It's like a 5-page, Word document. In that case, you're going from that stack of note cards, so you are filling in some of the details. And it was Rarity giving Luna, a pretty pink princess makeover to try to soften her image, and I thought it was a pretty funny scene. And Rarity is like she's affronted that Luna's not into it.
Well, and that's actually one of the cutscenes that was almost leaked because Hasbro's website for the show had some imagery in there of Luna in that kind of a dress, and so it kind of came out that was a scene that had been cut. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how that will happen. I wanted to go back to when you were talking about your episodes, Return of Harmony, which I think everybody will agree are some of the more epic of the episodes in the series. And I wanted to quick ask you, and this is something I think a lot of people are wondering. There's a scene towards the beginning of the episode where Pinkie Pie is drinking up all of the chocolate milk rain, and everyone out there, I think, made that connection to the internet song by Days on Day or whatever, Chocolate Rain. Right. Was that what you were thinking at the time, or was that somewhere else? Or
no, I had not heard of that until somebody told me, "Isn't that funny? You put that in the episode." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I saw the video, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's really funny." And actually, the Chocolate Rain thing, I'm almost positive was Rob's idea. So, but I don't think he had that in mind either. I just think he thought it was funny. So I do think, I can't swear to it, but I think it was just a complete coincidence that happened, because I had never heard of it. A lot of that kind of thing I'm completely illiterate about.
Sure.
So
people are going to be so disappointed.
They're going to be disappointed.
I can see the comments now.
There's a lot of stuff I'll say that is going to really disappoint people.
You've got to take credit for it. When people are giving you credit for that, just take it. Yes, I knew what Chocolate Rain was. I put that in there for a reason.
Yeah, you got to own it. But actually, I think that people, they definitely do read really, really, really into these episodes, for any of them, and look for these.
I love that.
Well, I think it's fun on the one hand, but on the other hand, they then ascribe, their own theories as to why certain things were written or boarded or animated certain ways. And sometimes I think, the explanation is simpler. It just happened to be that way,
Yeah, and I know that's disappointing to some people, but that is really the case. And a lot of times it's just, that happened. Chocolate milk rain kind of coincided with this meme that we didn't really know anything about. Unless Rob did, and maybe he did. I don't know.
Maybe he's not willing to admit that he knew it.
Maybe he's not willing to admit. Although that was his ringtone, so.
Was it really?
No.
Oh.